There are wounds that don't appear on the skin, yet carve themselves deeper into the heart with each passing day. I once believed that marriage was a safe harbor, that my husband's family would be my home. But it was there in that very place that I endured the greatest humiliation of my life. They looked at me as though I were a useless shadow, a name that could never carry their bloodline forward. They thought I would remain silent forever, small, meek, resigned. They were wrong. This is not just a story of betrayal, of pain and loss. This is the story of how I rose from the ashes, how I found hope where it seemed nothing was left, and how I rebuilt an entire world for myself. A story without screams, without revenge through violence, but with the sweetest revenge of all living happier than ever. Chapter 1. Paisley's Baby Shower. That day I walked into my sister-in-law's baby shower, feeling like a stranger in my own family. The whole room glittered with pink and white balloons, sparkling ribbons hanging from the ceiling, everyone laughing, chatting, raising glasses in celebration. In the center of the room, Paisley, my sister-in-law, younger than me by a few years, stood tall like a queen at her coronation. One hand rested gently under her round belly, the other raised a glass of juice, as if it were champagne. Her eyes caught mine, her head tilted slightly, and she flashed a sweet smile. But beneath that smile was the venom I knew all too well. Then her voice rang out just loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Still no news? You still don't have kids?" I froze. The chatter around me faded as if someone had just cut off the music. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. The coffee cup in my hand trembled suddenly heavy, as though it might drop. I forced the corners of my lips into a strained smile, pretending nothing was wrong. "Oh, Paisley, you're so funny," I replied, my voice sounding foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. But Paisley wasn't done. She shrugged, feigning innocence, then turned to the crowd as if they were her personal audience. "I just meant, it's been 6 years, hasn't it? I thought there'd be some good news by now." 6 years. She emphasized the number like a sentence, as if my marriage had already expired. At that moment, my mother-in-law, Patricia, shot to her feet. Her face glowed with joy, but I knew it was nothing more than triumph. "Paisley will give us our first grandchild," she proclaimed, her voice echoing like a royal decree. I even saw a glimmering tear at the corner of her eye. "Finally, this family will have an heir." I felt like I was being executed in front of an audience. My cheeks burned, but I kept smiling, kept nodding, as if I were truly happy to witness their victory parade. I looked toward my husband, Derek. He stood near the gift table, chatting animatedly with Marcus Paisley's husband. I hoped for just one sympathetic glance, a supportive nod, any sign that he was still on my side. But when our eyes met, he only smirked a half smile, as if my humiliation were nothing more than mild entertainment to him. "Nat's always been the career woman," Derek said loud enough for me to hear. "Everyone just has different priorities." Those words pierced straight into my heart. He spoke as if my yearning for motherhood were just a passing whim, as if my 3 miscarriages were nothing, as if all those lonely hours in clinics enduring painful treatments while he refused to get tested were just me being dramatic. I couldn't breathe. I rose to my feet, excusing myself to the bathroom, my legs nearly giving way beneath me. The hallway was lined with family photos, his parents' wedding portrait, their anniversary pictures, Derek's childhood photos, all proof that I was nothing but an extra piece, a withered branch on the family tree they worshipped. I stared into the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Had I really allowed myself to shrink this small all these years? I used to be strong. I used to fight. I used to speak up for myself. And yet, here in this house, I was nothing but a shadow, one that knew how to smile and let it go, even when being torn apart in front of a crowd. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Marriage and the We Rise Memory. I left the party with a suffocating weight on my chest. On the way home, no one in the car said a word. Derek buried himself in his phone, occasionally smiling when the screen lit up, never once glancing at me. When we stopped at a red light, he asked flatly, You okay?" His voice sounded more like a hollow courtesy than genuine concern. "I'm fine," I replied. What else could I say? That I had just been publicly executed in front of his family, that his mother had outright announced my replacement, that he, the one who should have defended me, chose silence instead. Good, Derek answered quickly before lowering his head back to his phone. He added another line salt on an open wound. Paisley really does look radiant. Pregnancy suits her. I turned my face toward the window, forcing down the lump in my throat. I had been pregnant 3 times, and 3 times it ended in pain and tears. I had once looked radiant too before my body betrayed me. But Derek had never seen it as our shared grief, only as a private inconvenience of mine. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene of that entire room, looking at me like I was a failure. I wanted to call my sister to pour it all out, but I knew she would cry for me, and I no longer had the strength to carry anyone else's tears. In that moment of despair, an old memory suddenly resurfaced. Years ago, I had been eating lunch alone on a wooden bench in the park. I noticed a little girl playing on the monkey bars. She fell hard onto the ground. I held my breath, waiting for her to cry, but she didn't. She simply sat up, brushed the dust off her knees, and looked toward her mother. The mother ran over, helped her to her feet, and said, "You're strong. We'll get up again. We rise." The girl nodded, then went back to the monkey bars, falling again and again, climbing back each time until she finally made it across. That day, I wrote the words, "We rise," on a sticky note and stuck it to my bathroom mirror. I didn't know why, only that I needed the reminder every morning. Now lying in the darkness years later, after so many failures and humiliations, I suddenly remembered that note. And for the first time in a long while, something stirred inside me. Not anger, not exactly hatred. It was more like a faint flicker, a tiny ember small, but enough to make me want to take a deep breath. I asked myself, perhaps it was finally time to rise again. Chapter 3, A New Path. Adoption and the Lawyer. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I made coffee, sat in front of my laptop, and for some reason, I opened an old mailbox I hadn't touched in years. I scrolled all the way down to where forgotten emails lay buried in dust. And then I saw it. A letter from an adoption center. It had been sent to me more than a year ago, but I had never been brave enough to open it again. My heart pounded as I read each line. A baby girl had just been born and needed a home. My hand trembled on the keyboard, then pulled back. It took me several minutes before I found the strength to pick up the phone. When a warm female voice answered on the other end, I nearly broke into tears. I contacted your center over a year ago," I whispered. At that time, I wasn't ready. But now, "I think I am," she replied gently. "I remember you. And yes, there is still a baby girl waiting for a mother." I set the phone down on the table, my whole body shaking. For the first time in years, I saw another road ahead of me. Not the path my in-laws had laid out. Not the endless expectations that never came true. This was the path I chose for myself. But before I could take it, I knew I had to end something else. I typed into the search bar, "discreet divorce lawyer," and that was how I found Margaret Chen. Her office was small but strangely warm. Soft yellow lights, polished wooden tables, tissue boxes placed everywhere, as if prepared for every sorrowful story. She sat across from me, her silver hair neatly tied back, kind eyes behind her glasses. She poured me a cup of tea without asking and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." And I told her. Every memory, every wound I had carried for 6 years. The miscarriages, the nights curled up in hospital beds, the treatments Derek refused to be part of, dismissing them as my problem. I told her about Paisley's barbs, Patricia's contempt, my husband's cruel silence, and finally, the baby shower that felt like the killing blow. Margaret didn't interrupt. She only nodded occasionally, jotting down notes in her book. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, studied me for a long moment, then said, "I've practiced law for 30 years, and I can tell when someone makes a decision out of anger and when they make it because they truly see the path they want. You are angry, I can see that. But deep down, you already know exactly what you need, and what you need is no longer inside this marriage." I sat in silence, my hand gripping the teacup, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I knew what I wanted. Margaret went on. "We can proceed quietly, without noise, without theatrics. Everything will be handled cleanly. But you need to prepare yourself. This will be the first step toward an entirely new life. An entirely new life." I closed my eyes, took a long breath. Yes, I had been waiting for this moment for far too long. Chapter 4. Exodus and the Journey into Motherhood. After meeting with the lawyer, I began a silent migration. I called it my invisible exodus. Each night, while Derek was glued to the TV or buried in his phone, I quietly withdrew from that house piece by piece. A sweater slipped into my gym bag, a few old books, the necklace my grandmother left me. I gathered fragments of my life like an escapee, and he never noticed. 2 weeks passed. Half my belongings were gone, and Derek still hadn't realized. That truth cut me, yet freed me. My presence had been so insignificant that even my absence went unnoticed. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was the adoption center. Her voice was warm but urgent. "The baby girl has been born. Her birth mother wants her to have a home immediately. Can you come to the hospital on Thursday?" I sat frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. A tiny life was waiting for me. Not as a bandage for old wounds, but as a beginning. I managed only 2 whisper words, "I'll come." On Thursday, I stepped into the cold white room where a young woman, with weary, yet resolute eyes waited. She was the baby's birth mother. She gave me a faint smile and said, "I chose you, because in your letter you wrote that you've been waiting to be a mother for so long. I want my daughter to have someone who truly longs for her." When the nurse placed the baby in my arms, the world stopped. She was so tiny, wrapped in a white blanket, her little fingers curling tightly around mine. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Hello, little one. I'm your mother." The baby opened her eyes for a brief moment, then closed them again. In that instant, I knew we belonged to each other. I named her Hope. Not only because she was hope, but because she was proof that life could bloom, even after the longest, coldest winters. I stayed at the hospital for 3 days, learning how to change diapers, how to cradle her so she could sleep peacefully, how to distinguish each small cry. In that brief time, I felt as though I had been reborn alongside her. When we were discharged, I didn't return to the old house. I called Julie my best friend since college. After I said only one sentence, "I need a place to start over," Julie replied immediately, "Come. My home always has space for you and your baby." That evening, I set up a small crib beside the sofa in Julie's living room. I lay down listening to Hope's steady breathing, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the false peace of gritted teeth and endurance, but real peace, the kind that comes from knowing I had escaped the place that made me small and had begun a new journey, the journey of motherhood on my own terms. Chapter 5. Rebuilding Daycare and Independence. Those first days at Julie's felt like a quiet pause, a breath after the storm. Julie hugged me, looked straight into my eyes, and said, "You finally did the thing I've been waiting for all these years. At last, you chose yourself." Hearing that, I cried, as if releasing all the years of pent-up anguish. Hope grew day by day. She laughed so easily, her bright eyes lighting up whenever she looked at me, as if her entire world was contained in my arms. Some nights, I rocked her to sleep, whispering, "We'll be okay, baby girl. We'll walk this road together." But I knew I couldn't lean on Julie's home forever. I needed a life of independence, not just for me, but for Hope as well. And then an unexpected opportunity arrived. One afternoon, Julie's neighbor knocked on the door, hesitant. "Could you watch my child for a few hours? I have to cover an extra shift at work and there's no one else." I agreed. The baby slept soundly in a crib beside Hope. When the mother returned and saw her child safe, her eyes welled with tears. "You're amazing. I wish I could leave my child with you more often." Those words planted an idea in my mind. From that day forward, I began taking in a few more children from the neighborhood babysitting during the day. At first it was just one or two, but gradually word spread. Every mother said the same thing: Miss Natalie always makes the kids laugh all day. I rearranged the living room into little zones: a study corner, a play corner, and a reading nook. The children's books I collected from secondhand shops suddenly became treasures. Kids came to my home not only to be cared for, but to learn to play to feel safe. Hope was just learning to walk, but she blended right in, toddling around with the older children, giggling and chattering. I realized I wasn't just raising my daughter, I was building a small community, one grounded in love and patience. A nurse in town with twins enrolled them 3 days a week. She told me, "They talk about you constantly. They call you Miss Natalie. And you know what they cry their eyes out if I say they're not going to your house today." Miss Natalie. I smiled. I was no longer the barren daughter-in-law of the Miller family. I was no longer my husband's shadow. I had a name of my own, a role of my own, a life of my own that I was creating with my own hands. I completed the paperwork to open an official daycare, and within just a few months, my schedule was full. The work was tiring, but each day I felt useful. I no longer had to prove my worth to a family that had always despised me. I found my worth in children's laughter, in the trust the mothers of this town placed in me. One day, Hope ran toward me, holding out a crayon drawing of 3 figures: a mother with brown hair, a little girl with pigtails, and a small house under a yellow sun. She said innocently, "This is our family, Mommy." My heart tightened, but not from pain. This time it tightened from pure happiness. Chapter 6, New Levan, a reborn family. Life for me and Hope gradually settled into a peaceful rhythm. By day I cared for the children. By night it was just the 2 of us. I thought perhaps my life would remain contained in that small world, a world without men, without old wounds. But then, fate sent me an encounter I hadn't expected. That day, I rushed Hope to the pediatric clinic because she had a mild fever. On the way in, I collided with a man holding a large cup of coffee. The entire drink spilled down his shirt. I recoiled in panic, stammering, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you." He smiled, his kind brown eyes reassuring. "It's all right. What matters is that you and your daughter are okay. Let me buy you another cup." His tone surprised me. No irritation, no anger, just pure sincerity. His name was Daniel. His work was redesigning libraries to make them more child-friendly. We ended up talking at first just a few minutes, then for over an hour. While Hope busied herself stacking blocks, Daniel and I shared stories about the challenges of single parenting. He told me about his 8-year-old son, Marcus, whom he had been raising almost entirely on his own after his ex-wife remarried. I realized I was at ease, even laughing more than I thought possible. For the first time in a long while, my heart felt light. Daniel began finding reasons to visit Millbrook more often. A work meeting, a library survey. But I knew the real reason was to see me and Hope. He often brought pastries or coffee, and to my surprise, Hope quickly warmed to him. She had always been cautious with strangers, yet after only a few visits, she was happily chirping, calling him Uncle Danny. One afternoon, Hope and Daniel were building a wooden block castle together. She looked up, eyes sparkling, and innocently said, "Uncle Danny, you can be my daddy if you want." I froze. The blocks slipped from Daniel's hands and clattered to the floor. He looked at Hope, then at me, his eyes filled with surprise and something deeper unspoken. His voice was low and warm as he said, "Hope is your joy. For me it would be an honor, if both of you agreed." Hope laughed, nodding firmly. She didn't understand it all, but somehow she had spoken the words of my heart. I nodded too, my eyes stinging with tears, unable to speak. In that moment, I knew Daniel wasn't just a passerby in my life. He He was home, and with him with hope. I finally had a real family. Chapter 7. The Second Baby Shower. One afternoon, I received a cream-colored envelope. Inside was a glittering silver-lettered card, Paisley's baby shower. Tucked alongside it was a small note from my cousin Rebecca. I'm sending this so you'll know. You don't have to go, but I thought you deserved the choice. I stood frozen in the kitchen while Hope played with her blocks on the floor. 4 years had passed since I left that house. 4 years of a new life, of children's laughter, of freedom. I thought my wounds had healed. And yet, seeing those familiar names, Patricia, Paisley, Aunt Margaret, my heart tightened. Not in anger, not in fear, only I knew I needed closure. Hope looked up, her bright eyes curious. Mommy, what's that? It's an invitation, sweetheart. Are we going? She asked eagerly. I looked into her shining eyes. My daughter had never known what it felt like to be belittled. She only knew love, confidence, and joy. I smiled, smoothing her hair. Yes, we're going. On that day, I chose a vivid red dress, the same shade I had once worn at my wedding, but this time not to please anyone. This time it was a declaration I had returned stronger than ever. Hope wore a pale yellow dress, holding the gift we had chosen together, a children's book about a little girl who built her own castle. Daniel walked beside me, steady and kind, his eyes both gentle and resolute. We weren't just attending a party. We were arriving as a family. The room looked exactly as it had years ago. Balloons, ribbons, lace-covered tables, chatter about houses, cars, schools. But when the 3 of us stepped in, the noise was swallowed whole. A ripple of silence spread from the door to the back of the room. Every eye turned toward me. Derek reacted first. He was standing by the gift table, a beer bottle in hand. The moment he saw me, his hand shook. The bottle slipped, shattered foam splashing across the floor. Hope giggled. Somebody spilled their drink, Mommy. Patricia sat at the main table. Her eyes went wide, her face draining of color. She sank into her chair as though her legs could no longer hold her. But the moment I waited for was with Paisley. She stood in the center belly round with her second pregnancy face glowing until her gaze landed on me. The color drained in seconds. Her mouth opened, opened again like a fish gasping for air. And then breaking the tension came Hope's clear voice. I'm Hope Rodriguez Miller. I carry my mommy's name, and the name she once had. I watched the faces shift in unison. The very surname they had once mocked, the one they claimed I could never pass on, now rang out boldly from my daughter's lips. Patricia, stammered Natalie. We didn't know. I smiled, my voice calm. Rebecca invited us, and we wanted to congratulate you. We also brought a gift. Hope toddled over to the gift table, carefully placing the book down. This is for the baby. It's about a girl who builds her own castle. Daniel clasped my hand, then extended his other. I'm Daniel, Natalie's fiancé. It's a pleasure to meet Hope's extended family. The word fiancé rippled through the room like a current of electricity. I didn't need to say more. Our presence, the steadiness in my eyes, was the clearest answer of all. We stayed just long enough to be polite for my daughter to laugh, compliment Paisley's dress, nibble a cookie, and then we left. Before stepping out, I caught my reflection in a wall mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer the one who had once trembled in a bathroom 4 years ago. She stood tall, smiling, her eyes alight with peace. This time, I wasn't publicly executed. This time, I held the power. I had reclaimed my story. Chapter 8. Closure and a Quiet Victory. After that day, I thought everything had ended, but a week later, my phone rang. On the screen appeared a name I had erased from my life 4 years ago, Derek. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I picked up. Hello, Derek. There was silence for a few seconds. Then his voice came through, slow, uncertain. Natalie, you looked amazing that day. I miss you. Maybe we could Meet for coffee talk one last time. I sat at the kitchen table peeling apples for the children's snacks tomorrow, the phone pressed to my ear. A small laugh escaped me, not from joy, but from realizing I no longer trembled at the sound of his voice. "Derek," I said, gently but firmly, "what we had ended the day I walked out of your house. There is nothing left to rebuild. Your sister was right about one thing: in your family's eyes I was barren, but not anymore. I have a daughter, I have a family, I have a life you never had the courage to give me. And most importantly, I'm happy. You no longer have a place in that picture." The line went quiet. He exhaled, then said, "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I replied, "but intentions don't erase consequences. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just finished." Then I hung up. For the first time, my heart didn't race after facing him. No shaking, no regret, just a steady, quiet clarity. A few months later, the local newspaper ran a piece on family support centers in town. They called my daycare the heart of the community, alongside a photo of me reading to the children with Hope sitting in the front row, her tiny arm around a friend. I framed the article and hung it by the entrance, not for boasting, but as a reminder of how far I had come from someone dismissed as worthless to someone building an entire little community. One evening, Hope brought home an assignment from kindergarten. The task was to draw her family. She spread the paper on the table, carefully sketching 3 figures, holding hands beneath a rainbow. Me, Daniel, and herself. Across the top, in wobbly but confident letters, she wrote, "My Family," by Hope Rodriguez Miller. I asked Sweetheart, "What do you love most about our family?" Hope thought for a moment, then answered, "We laugh a lot. And when someone's sad, we hug until they're happy again. Also, Daddy Daniel makes really good pancakes." I burst out laughing and hugged her tightly. In that moment, I understood family is not the place where people force you to prove your worth. Family is where you are free to be yourself and where your child grows up knowing unconditional love. That night, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. The old sticky note still clung to the mirror. The words faded with time. "We rise." I peeled it off, carried it into Hope's room, and placed it beside her keepsake box, where the adoption papers, her first photos, and now her rainbow family drawing were kept safe. I knew one day I would tell her the whole story, that there was once a time her mother was small, belittled, cast aside, but that her mother chose to rise, and that choice led her to hope. I would tell her that sometimes family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose, the one you build with love and courage. And in the stillness of the night, as I watched my daughter sleep, I whispered to myself, I had won. Not against Derek, not against Paisley or Patricia. I had won against doubt, against fear, against the wounds that once held me down. I had won to find peace and to teach my daughter that we will always rise. We rise. Today, as I look back on it all, I realize the most important truth recognition from others never defined my worth. Their cruel words never wrote my future. I wrote it myself through every decision, every courageous step I took. I don't need Paisley to fall, nor Patricia to feel remorse, nor Derek to beg for forgiveness, because my victory was never about them changing. My victory is that I changed. I became the mother I once longed to be, the woman I once admired, and the role model for my daughter to grow up believing that no one has the right to make us small unless we allow it. And if you too have ever been belittled, cast aside, or dismissed, remember this: you can rise. We can always rise. We rise. And what about you? Which moment in this story felt the most satisfying to you? Share it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories here on Scarlet Vows, where together we redefine strength and justice.